Thank you. Good. Well, it's great to be here. Great to be back at Malvern, and it's great to see all of you. I hope you're having a blessed retreat, and I'm blessed to be able to come here every so often and share some thoughts, some words about our journey of as men. And I'm going to unpack something for you tonight that I've been unpacking. Is that though? Is that kind of yeah? Is it reverb there? Okay. I've been unpacking what you just heard, for about 3 years, still trying to kind of see what it all means. I want to ask you a couple questions before we begin. By the way, I have 8 kids now. I just had update your notes. Yeah, yeah. Wife just had baby number 8, 16 weeks old, Ita Fidelis. Father Fidelis did bless that child in utero. All right, question for you. Do you feel imprisoned? Raise your hand if you feel imprisoned. Okay. Okay. All right. Could it be that you're in a waiting room now? God has you in a waiting room. This is something someone recently sent me, and I think it's pretty profound. As I said, what happened to me a couple of years ago is extremely profound, and I would say maybe the greatest thing, next to my children being born and my wife marrying me, the greatest thing that ever happened to me. And I'll explain why. But I want to read this to you. Sometimes God allows us to sit in places we never prayed for, rooms we didn't choose, those of you that raised your hands, seasons we didn't expect, chapters that feel too long, too quiet, or too heavy. Maybe that's where you find yourself. The patriarch Joseph in the Old Testament knew that feeling. If you know anything about Joseph, he's the one that was thrown into a cistern and sold into slavery by his brothers. All right, the tribes of Israel. He was sold into slavery, betrayed, forgotten, and unjustly imprisoned. He spent years in a place that looked nothing like the dreams God had shown him, revealed to him. But heaven was not silent. God was not late. Every delay carried design. Every quiet day in that prison cell was forming the character required for the calling ahead. Joseph didn't know it, but the palace walls were being prepared at the same time his heart was being refined. Because with God, waiting is never wasted. Hidden seasons are holy ground. Prisons become preparation rooms in the hands of a faithful God. And when the time was right, not early, not rushed, not forced, Joseph was lifted from a prison to a palace in a single day. So maybe that's your situation. I don't know. Maybe it's not. But for those of you that raise your hand that you felt like you're in prison or imprisoned, and perhaps those words mean something to you, I want to share with you that the theology of the cross is something for all of us to embrace and to know and to get familiar with intimately. And when God sends you a cross, it's his gift to you. Yeah, that's what I'm going to throw at you today. When God sends you a cross, I know this retreat's theme is hope. There's a lot of hope in the cross. There's a lot of hope in the cross, a lot of hope in suffering, especially unjust suffering. Unjust suffering has an access point to God that you really don't have with the just suffering, right? Sometimes it's justified when we suffer, it's just, maybe we brought it about ourselves, maybe our choices. And we say, yeah, I put myself here. I put myself in this prison. but it's the unjust stuff. You know, when the FBI raids your home at 6:30 in the morning, that kind of unjust stuff. Some of you heard about it. Some of you know about it. I'll share a little bit about it, and I'll take you into that place because it was a dark place. Um, just because it's a grace, just because it's a gift, doesn't mean it's not hard. Doesn't mean it's not hard. Obviously, that was hard. That was hard for the Lord, right? No one suffered more than the Lord. Yet that's his glory. And that's something that he desired, right? He longed for it. He wanted it. And yet that heart of him says, Lord, take this cup away from me. So it's okay to cringe a little when the cross comes. It's okay to be like, I'm not sure if I want this. But in the end, you have to embrace that. You got to embrace that diagnosis of cancer. You got to embrace that. Yeah, you got your shock, you got your disbelief, and you have whatever, your strategy. Augustine says that cancer is God's way of bringing his children home. Something's got to take us home, right? For some of us, it's cancer. This young man, he got his diagnosis. 10 days later, he was dead. Are you ready for that type of diagnosis? He certainly was. I don't know, man. I don't know. I was kind of nervous with my recent colonoscopy. How many of you ever gone for a colonoscopy? Yeah, I was kind of nervous, right? I never did it before. This is the best sleep I've ever had in my life. But I tell you, I never did it before. And certainly the worst part of it is the night before, right? You got to take that, whatever the heck that is. And you're on the pot all night. But anyhow, we digress. But that cancer diagnosis, that spouse that's taken from you. My dad died when I was 11. He was buried on my 12th birthday. That's hard for any young man, right? That's hard for any person to deal with premature death, a young death. Just lost a 19-year-old friend who was riding his motorcycle and killed instantly on 309. And it's hard to justify those things, but that young man was ready because you know what? I was at the shrine at Czestochowa that day in line for confession, and there he was at the end of the line. He was ready. Are you ready? Is your maybe your cross is preparing you for that. Start thinking about crosses a little bit differently. Yeah, this was a sign of evil 2,000 years ago. When you saw a crucifix, someone being put on a cross, that was the worst death you could ever experience. And the Romans really knew how to torture you, right? They knew just the right spot to put the nail. And that ulnar nerve right there that just drives you absolutely bonkers if it's touched, right? Right in there. But that is transformed. Now we wear that around our necks. The ultimate sign of evil, redeemed instantly. Christ gets on a cross, and now it's the greatest sign of love there ever was. And so my challenge to you tonight, this weekend, is to continue to reflect on those crosses that God has given you, those that you brought to this weekend. He's not taking them away from you. He's not, again, it's his gift to you. And you may look at it like, this sucks, you know, like, take this away. Like, why? You know, give me another cross, right? Give me something else. No, that one's specifically set up for you. Fulton Sheen said this once: the greatest cross is not to have one. John Vianney said the greatest fear is a fear of a cross. Look at that. Those two saints. Greatest cross is not to have one. Greatest fear. It actually has a phobia name to it. It's called starophobia, fear of crosses. That's what John Vianney said, greatest fear. Paradox. Heaven comes to earth right into a manger. Eucharist, heaven comes to earth. Paradox. No child in the manger yet, but poverty, humblest person that you could find, right? born in a stable, born in a cave. Paradox, the King of Kings with the humblest of creatures. There's something about a cross that is truly magnificent. God, it said, I heard once said, will never take you to a place that his grace won't sustain you. He'll never take you to a spot you can't be sustained by his grace. You may think like the AA would say, is anybody here in AA? Anybody does the 12 steps, right? You had to hit your rock bottom. That's the place, right? That's your grace is just, his grace rather is sustaining you in that rock bottom. Like you're not without his presence. The 12 are freaking out in the boat, but why are they freaking out when Jesus is in the boat? They forgot that he was in the boat. That's the problem. You forget that he's there with you. Mother Teresa says, when you are suffering in agony, emotionally, psychologically, physically, you're so close to the cross of Christ. You could pluck a splinter off the cross. That's how powerful that experience is. It transcends everything, gives you meaning. Pain has purpose. It does. That's my testimony for you tonight. And I want to take you to that point because it's dark there. It has to be dark. I mean, when Jesus is hanging in a cistern waiting for his moment before Pilate, before he's sent to the Via Dolorosa, he's just waiting. He's hanging in a cistern waiting all night through the middle of the night, right? Waiting for this impending glorification. The agony, the torment, the abandonment, the betrayal, the thoughts that probably ran through his mind. Have you ever been calumniated before? Maybe one of the greatest sins there is, calumny. It's a tough word to say, calumny. Not some of you may not be even able to spell it, but calumny is probably one of the worst things that could ever happen to you. It's different than disparagement. Disparagement is when someone takes a truth about you and says, like, Frank is an a-hole, right? I know Frank is. That's why I said it. And that may be based on truth. Your dad isn't like that. He's a good man. I know that. But you might say that, and that could be based on some truth, right? Well, calumny is when people make stuff up about you deliberately to ruin you. Now that is a bad sin. They did that to Christ, of course. That is one of the worst things. The Catechism says when you are calumniated or you're the person that is responsible for that calumny, you have a duty to, one, repair the name, the good name, the reputation of the person you calumniated. This is in order to make reparation for that, right? This is like why we end up in purgatory a long time, because we don't deal with this stuff on earth. That's what another gift of the cross is. You can kind of make atonement. You can have temporal punishment removed. That's why crosses are another gift, but neither here nor there at this point. I want to talk about repairing the good name. You have a duty to do that. And you also have a duty to restore what was lost. Like if someone lost income because you lied about them, maybe in business, maybe they got kicked out of a school or something, or I don't know. You lied. You ruined them. You have a duty to pay them what they lost. Wow. That's pretty darn hard to do, right? Especially if it's been a while since you've seen that person. All right. So I was calumniated in 2021 on the streets of Planned Parenthood in Philadelphia, 12th and Locust. My son was harassed and bullied. Some of you know the story, and I protected him. I'm not going to get into that. I just did what a good father would do, and I protected him from being abused, all right, emotionally on the sidewalk. 12-year-old boy, okay? You could say, well, why did you bring them down there? Well, we can talk about that another time, but I'm a homeschool dad, and it was a cultural war kind of lesson for that day. Okay. We were going all year. We'd been there for 10 months every week for 4 hours. So anyhow, nonetheless, we neutralized whatever had to happen there, and I end up in a court. Now, Larry Krasner, who's a rabid pro-abortionist in Philadelphia, wanted nothing to do with it. He was not interested in it, and he jumps at those opportunities. So, in other words, what happened on the sidewalk was just a shoving match between two men who were handling it like men, and really, there was no crime committed that day. I was put into court and we won. The guy didn't even show up for court. In April of 2022, I was finally told I could go back to the sidewalk. I was told I couldn't be at the sidewalk for 6 months. And that's kind of tough too, right? Because, like, this is the land of the free, right? But you're told you can't enter a zone. I had no like restraining order against me or anything like that, but they just took that away. It's interesting as that type of stuff happens to you. You start to say, wow, are we really free? Or is this China, we're living in? You start to think about those things when they start to remove things that you normally could do. Anyhow, on April 22nd, I triumphantly returned to the sidewalk with my son, only to have a federal agent there to greet me with a target letter. And a target letter says you're a target of a federal grand jury investigation under potential indictment under the FACE Act, which is bad law that was created in 1993. Have your lawyer contact us right away. Okay, well, what's a grand jury? Well, that's just where they get a bunch of people in a room to lie about you, to calumniate you, and so they can indict you. It doesn't have to be based on truth. Grand juries are never based on truth. They just get somebody in the room that's going to say what they want you to say so they can indict you. All right. So when you hear like grand jury, or you hear like, oh, the grand jury, he testified before the grand jury, it's all hearsay. That's what it is. My own judge in my case said, oh, you mean that hearsay? That they were, whenever the prosecution, the federal government would refer to the grand jury, he would say, oh, you mean that collection of hearsay? Right? That's what it is. So that's calumny. Okay, so yeah, so I'm like, all right, this is all pre-Dobbs leak. The Dobbs case has not leaked. Joe Biden's in office, right, at this time. And the Dobbs case hasn't leaked. That comes in early May of 2022. So things aren't like what they were at that time after the Dobbs leak. So my lawyers, one of them's in the room here, like, guys were involved. There's Joe Stanton had a case in Allentown that was totally case law that would prevent them from indicting me. So I had case law, and they had no case. They still indicted me. But nonetheless, it happened after June 24th when Dobbs overturns Roe, and all these pro-lifers start getting arrested. Mar-a-Lago happens. Now I'm kind of sitting in the wings because I didn't break the law, fellas. I just defended my son. I didn't break the law. But they were going to try and use that awful law to kind of put people in prison that they didn't like. In this case, it's August, and my attorneys from the Thomas More Society contact me and they say, have you heard from the assistant U.S. attorney? I said, no. Why would I have heard from her? He said, well, they're not returning my phone calls. One of the things our attorney said in the very early days was, hey, if you want to indict this guy, just give us a call. We'll bring him in. We'll bring him into you. Peaceful guy. No threat to the community. We'll bring him to you. Just give us a call. Then we told him that, of course. And when my lawyer contacted me in August and said, have you heard? I said, no. And he said, well, why? I don't know what to do. I said, well, it's probably because there's no case here. All right, fast forward to September 23rd. It's a Friday morning around 6 o'clock in the morning. This is the feast of Padre Pio. Yeah, whoever said that, good job. Padre Pio, feast of Padre Pio. All right, so I'm up early. I got a quiche in the oven for the family because I bake, right? That's what real men do. We bake at 6 a.m., right? Got a quiche in the oven, and there's a heavy bang at the door. Way louder than that. And the doorbell rings over and over again on 6:30 in the morning. Now, my wife's asleep. My 7 kids at the time are all asleep. And I'm up, thanks be to God, and I'm downstairs. Person yells, "Open up!" And they're banging the door, and the doorbell rings over and over again. I'm like, geez. Like, all right. So what did I do? I went and got my gun, because that's what you do in Bucks County when someone comes to your door that you don't know and is an intruder and is banging on the door. Right? That's what you do, right? You grab your gun, right? Yeah. He's like, yeah, I got my gun. I didn't have a gun. I had my spatula. So that's all I did. I went to the door. I have airsoft guns. I don't have a gun. But everybody in Bucks County has a gun except me. And so I go to the door and I say, "What is it?" I just woke you up, didn't I? All right, stay awake. Who is it? I had to take authority over it. I'm like, how dare you do this? Like, it's my home. Bang, 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 bang. Doorbell rings over and over again. Open up. It's the FBI. Hurry up, hurry up, hurry up. It's like, geez, I'm not thinking target letter. I'm thinking someone just get hit by a car. There's a mass murder on the loose. Like, what's this, So I say to the door, "Stay calm." I'm speaking to the door. I can't see anything. It's a double door. I don't know what's going on out there. I don't know what's on my property. I said, "Stay calm. I got 7 babies in here. Please stay calm." I don't know why I said that, but that's what I said. And I think when you have a men all charged up, just got done listening to Metallica or Guns N' Roses, and they're charged up, the adrenaline's pumping, they're going to come to the door, and you say there's babies in here, I think you're going to be on your heels. I think God gave me that word. I don't know why I said it. That's why I said it. So they are my babies, but some are 12 and 10. So I come out, and there's 5 FBI agents, fully armored vests, ballistic helmets, ballistic shields, M16 guns pointed at me, 2 battering rams, 10 marked and unmarked units on the grass surrounding my property, all the way lined up back to the street. PA state troopers with pistols drawn behind their doors, at least 10 of them, 2 SWAT guys at the back door. What's SWAT? Special Weapons, Armor, and Tactics. That's what they had. And I have 2 other doors. No doubt 2 guys are there too. So I'm going to say about 20 to 25 people on my property. PA, state troopers, Philadelphia PD, Bucks County sheriffs, and a social worker were on the property. We found out that later. I said, what are you doing here? Right? That's what you would say, right? What are you doing here? Like, oh, you know why we're here. No. Oh, you're here because I rescue babies. That's what I said. And they're kind of looking, they patted me down, but nothing really happened. And I'm just kind of like, just looking at them, turn around as they do their thing. My wife comes down and she says, she gets right in front of the M16 gun. She's like, "Who are you here for?" Guns pointing right at her chest. Him, what's his name? Mark Houck. "Do you have a warrant for his arrest?" "Oh man, we're taking him with or without a warrant." That's what the Fed said. And you can't do that, right? That's a violation of your rights. But anyhow, she said you can't do that. That's kidnapping at gunpoint. So meanwhile, I'm like, I can't believe that she knows all these things. But anyhow, I'm there listening to this, and it's bad, right? My kids are all downrange. The guns are in the threshold of the home. Guns are scanning the room. The kids are all right there where the steps are, screaming their head off. So I'm like, I got to protect them. I go back to just protector mode, right? That's who I am. That's what I do. What do you want me to do? You got to come down to the fiddle building. Okay. Can I get some clothes on? I had shorts, t-shirts, and a flip-flops on. No. Can I get some sweatpants on? It's cold. September 23rd. It's cold. No. A sweatshirt? No. Shoes? No. All right. Can I bring my rosary? Yes. Feds let you bring your note to self. You can bring your rosary. So I had all I needed, right? I had everything I need. Weapon, all I need nothing else. So I have my rosary. So as we leave, and I can't say goodbye to the children, they don't give you that opportunity. I don't know when I'm coming back, folks. The January 6 people are still in prison at this point. I don't know when I'm coming back. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't even know what I'm being charged with at this point. So we go down to the federal building, and it's right next to the Independence Hall, which is where all our rights were established. Kind of ironic. It's right there, catty corner to that federal building. And so they fingerprint me, and mug shot you. And then I go to that place I just read to you. Remember that place? That place is your waiting room, right? The waiting room. Sometimes God's allowed you to sit in places you never prayed before. So they belly shackle me. I'm like, what? Why am I getting belly shackled, right? They ankle shackle me. I'm in their custody. Why are they doing this, right? All right. And then they bring me to a room. They put me in a room that I've never been before with a little table and a ring on it, and they cuff me to the table. And that's where I sat for 6 hours. Man, I was transported right to Calvary. I was right there. I was in Golgotha, place of the skull. I was at the foot of the cross. Now we're at the foot of the cross at every mass. At every mass, we're there. But I was there. I could feel it. I could touch it. I felt blessed. I had peace. I had charity in my heart. I had joy. I felt forgiveness. And I prayed without ceasing for 6 hours. Now that's easy to do when you're a Catholic, I think, because you got your rosary, right? So I can pray a rosary. It takes me, if I do take my time, I can pray a rosary a good 35, 40 minutes, right? One mystery, right? Luminous, joyful, glorious, sorrowful. I can 45 minutes. I could really drag it on. So I got like 3 hours right there with this baby. And I'm praying without cease. I'm praying for my wife. I'm praying for my children. I'm praying for the feds. I'm praying for everybody and anybody. And then I went to Divine Mercy Chapel and I prayed that, and I could drag that on for another half an hour. Then I did our emergency novenas, Mother Teresa's emergency novenas. That's 9 memoraries and a 10th one for Thanksgiving. I prayed a bunch of those too. So that was about 6 hours by the time I was done. And I was praying, and I felt the communion of the saints. I felt my guardian angel. Have you ever felt your guardian angel? I could feel the protection of my guardian angel. I didn't see them, but I could feel them. I knew I was safe. I knew I was protected. And I knew I was in a unique company. Now, I was born on the feast of Maximilian Kolbe, and I felt Maximilian's presence. I felt the saints. Man, I tell you, it was, you know why I know they were all there? Because my will and God's will were united. And that happens very rarely to anybody in their life. It usually happens to the saints at the end of the life. And it usually happens for a lot of us maybe 5 minutes before we die. That's where you like surrender everything and you just like, your will be done, Lord. But I knew what I did nothing wrong. And I knew that what was happening to me was in the will of God, and that I was in the will of God, and that our will was one, that I wanted what he wanted. And I said, if this is what you want, I accept it. And so that unitive way, I was there. And that's why I know I was in the presence of those saints, because they lived the unitive way, a lot of them, and sometimes got there through the dark night of the soul. But that wasn't my dark night, not yet anyway. So what I'm going to do in the next 15 minutes is I'm going to take you through what happened when I got home, because I was released on my own recognizance, and then take you all the way up to the trial. It's a really powerful experience that I invite you to see your own story, and not for what happened to me, but see it through the lens of the way I understood it, because you only understand suffering, men. Hear me on this. You only understand suffering through the lens of the life of Christ. That's the only way suffering makes sense. That's the only way it makes sense. Otherwise, you're rationalizing everything. So we're leaving, that they're going to release me on my own recognizance. So that means, why the heavy raid, right? Why? You're not a flight risk. You're not a violent offender. You have no prior record. Why the heavy raid? To intimidate you, to humiliate you, and to scare the hell out of you, right? That's why the heavy raid. And so we're leaving, and I'm like, all right, well, cool. Cuffs are coming off. No. Belly shackle comes off. No. Ankle shackles come off. I'm on the 6th floor. I got to go down to U.S. Marshals. Why are the ankle shackles on? At the very least, take them off so I can walk. No, you're going to do this the whole way. And I say to the agent, I said, is this really necessary? And he doesn't answer me. Now, he's from Delaware. And I said, do you have a heavy cross for me to carry? He says, I don't have a heavy cross for you to carry. I said, well, it's coming. It's coming. I knew it. And so when I got home that weekend, I was reunited with my family. And of course, we embraced, and it was, very emotional. But the Lord gave me two visions that weekend. He said, "You're going to carry your own cross, your own Via Dolorosa with me. You're going to walk the stations of the cross with me." The Lord said clearly to me, "This is what's going to happen." Now, I didn't have him appear to me, but he said to me, "This is what's going to happen." And then he said, "You're going to go to the State of the Union too." Yeah, the one in DC. I'm like, okay, yes, Lord, whatever. So, first station is what? Jesus is condemned to death. Now, I experienced all that I'm about to share with you real time. This isn't after the fact. Like, I didn't take notes and journal and think about it this way after everything was done. Like, no, this all happened real time. So I go before the judge 5 days later, or Tuesday, and I have my lawyer there with me, who was Brian McMonigal in the city of Philadelphia. He was $100,000 for his retainer. Yeah, I don't have that kind of money, but God does. God has that kind of money, because when you come after God's people, He'll fight for you. So we got Brian McMonigal. We had Jesse Barrett on the hook for it. You know who Jesse Barrett is? Amy Coney Barrett's husband. Yeah, he's Notre Dame grad. He wanted to take the case, but he said, "You don't want me. You want Brian McMonigal." Brian McMonigal defended Bill Cosby, got Bill Cosby a hung jury. That's how talented Brian McMonigal is, right? And he was my attorney. And when the AUSA looked over and saw Brian there, she said, "Oh boy, they brought out the big guns." That's right. You better expect God to defend you and fight for you. And she knew it too. So anyhow, that's arraignment day. That's like you declare innocent or guilty, right? And so you're before your judge. I'm before Judge Papert, right? Gerald Papert, Notre Dame grad, Villanova law professor. Okay, there he is, right? I'm before him, and you're before the judge. So that's Pilate, right? That's an easy first station. Well, okay, boom, we're done. What's next, Lord? Then the second state, you just start carrying your cross. When God gives you a cross, you just embrace it. Like Mel Gibson's Jim Caviezel does in The Passion. He just embraces it, right? You just start carrying it. You don't have to like it. You just start carrying it, right? And you move with it. And that's all you do. So you just keep on keeping on. You just keep on being a man, as the father says to his son in Old Yeller after Yeller dies. You just go on being a man. That's what you do. You just carry the cross. And that's what men do, right? So I started carrying it. Now, station 3 is like the whole world's pouring out their love upon my family and me. We start getting all this global news, right? Mother Teresa's nuns in Calcutta send a picture of our family on Mother's sarcophagus in Calcutta. And the note says, "We're praying for you here every morning." I'm like, geez. Then I get a village in Kenya. Somebody donated to a village in Kenya, and they got this village like praying for me in Kenya. And they have like signs like, "We pray for Mark Houck." Each had a letter, and they're all standing there with really white teeth, in Kenya. And I'm like, wow, man, Kenya's praying for me. Then Europe starts sending messages. I'm like, Europe? This is like a major miracle. Europe is praying again? Yes, right? We're getting notes from Europe, Canada, Australia. I get a note from a guy in Middle America, Heartland, and he says, "I'm a lousy Catholic, but seeing what's happening to you is bringing me back to the church." And I'm like, okay, we're done here, right? I can do that math. Save a soul, save your own soul. Brothers, it's easy. That's it. I'd do it for that guy. I don't need any more than that. That guy's back in the church because of my yes to God. Sign me up for that one. Then Cardinal Gerhard Mueller shows up at my door. Yeah, this is the former prefect for the doctrine of the faith, same role that Cardinal Ratzinger was in under John Paul II. Yeah, he was that for Pope Benedict, and he was that for Pope Francis. Gerhard Mueller shows up at my door. I knew he was coming, but 2 weeks later, he comes to my door. Reclaims the home for us. Blesses all the children. Holy waters all the room. Condemns what happens on the doorstep and takes a video of it. As a prince in the Catholic Church, he condemns it. I'm like, wow. That's what clergy should do, right? That's what the episcopacy should do. So I'm motivated. I'm feeling blessed. And we're praying like we've never prayed before. Mueller says to me at the table, we had lunch with us. He says, "You're like Dr. Martin Luther King." I'm like, "What?" You're looking at the white Dr. Martin Luther King. Now, I'm no Dr. Martin Luther King. He's like, "Yeah, you're going to be persecuted like him too." I'm like, okay. Then I'm at another event, and the papers are saying pro-life hero, right? And they're saying other things too, but the good stuff. One person says, "You're like Joan of Arc." Joan of Arc. Mark Twain said, "She is the greatest human being that ever existed." Mark Twain wrote that in his classic masterpiece, Joan of Arc. I'm no Joan of Arc. She led the army of France against Britain and freed France from Britain's tyranny over them, right? Like, that's not me. I'm a dad. I'm a pro-lifer. But people are being inspired, right? I'm like, what is going on? I'm standing next to one guy at an event. He's like, "I feel like I'm standing next to Jesus Christ." Couldn't believe it, man. Couldn't believe it. I'm like, "Well, what does the matter with people?" This is not me. I tell you, that was a crushing weight, all of that. You say, isn't that wonderful? It is wonderful, but it was overwhelming all at the same time. We couldn't pray enough. We couldn't thank God enough, for the graces that he was bestowing on us. Meanwhile, we're facing 11 years in prison, $350,000 in fines, and 3 years supervised probation. So while we're having all these wonderful graces, death is looming. When the government comes after you, it's a 98 to 99% conviction rate. You're going to prison, so reconcile that. As a young father, like, you're done. You're not coming back. My chairman of my board for my nonprofit, he's a former federal prosecutor. I said, "Is the government going to give me any time with my kids?" He said, "Yeah, you'll probably get 3 months." I'm like, "Oh, that's great. I'm happy about that. At least I get 3 months of my." He said, "Well, that's if they want to be nice to you." I said, "Well, they don't want to be nice to me." He said, "Well, then you'll probably get locked up right away." I'm like, "Oh." So I'm looking up life in federal prison, right? Because I'm going to max security federal penitentiary because I got an assault charge. That's at least what I'm expecting. I don't think I'm getting a country club here. So I'm looking at like different places. I'm like, all right, what's life like in federal prison, right? Not good what I read there. Don't advise you looking that stuff up. But I found one in Allenwood, PA. I'm like, that's like near Williamsport. That's like 2 hour drive from my house. I'm like, "Pat, are they going to send me to like Allenwood?" He's like, "No, you'll probably go to Denver or Leavenworth, Kansas." I'm like, and that's what they did to the J6ers. So anyhow, station 4, 5, and 6 are all stations of consolation. Mary, Simon, Veronica, all these Simons were coming out of the woodwork. Men that I hadn't talked to in years were calling me up, and relationships are healing. Veronica's are bringing food to the house. Of course, Our Lady is wrapping her mantle around us. And for about a good month and a half, just felt so good, right? So protected. She was a mother to us in so many ways. Just to expedite this, Station 7 was looming, and that's where Jesus falls the second time. Yeah, the first time is Station 3. The second time, again, this is all real time. And what that was for me was darkness. I entered about a month of darkness. I went to Father Doug McKay. I don't know if he's here. Is Father Doug McKay in this room right now? Well, you know who he is. He's like the rector emeritus here. But Father Doug McKay is a really powerful dude. And at the time, I asked him to do some spiritual direction with me. And I came to him in despair. And I said, I can't do this. He said, "Yes, you can." Now, we're at Gray's Ferry, you know, and being in Gray's Ferry, if you don't have faith, there's something wrong with you, right? Because being in Gray's Ferry, you better have a faith about you because it's a pretty scary part of town. But anyhow, I'm with Doug McKay in his house, and he's like, "Yes, you can." I said, "No, I can't." He said, "Yes, you can." "You know about St. Catherine of Siena?" I'm like, "Yeah." He said, "So I was experiencing demons and dark demons that were coming to me at night and during the day that were telling me that I was no hero and that I was a man of lust." That's what he was. Now, I struggled with sins of the flesh for many years when I was a youngster and into my early 20s. But I had been set free for a long time. And this demon came back and said, "You're not any of those people. You are that man. You are that fleshy guy." And I fell to sins that I hadn't fallen to in years. And I was in darkness. I felt like a terrible husband, terrible father. And I just said to Father, "I can't do it." He said, "Yes, you can. You know about St. Catherine of Siena?" I said, "No." "Well, yes, but what do you mean?" He said, "Well, Jesus appeared to her." And I said, "Well, yeah, okay. What do you mean?" He said, "Well, she was being tormented by demons of lust that were tormenting her soul. And she said to Jesus, 'Where are you, Jesus?' And Jesus says to Catherine, 'Catherine, I'm right there.' 'No, Jesus, you couldn't be there.' 'Catherine, I'm right there.' 'No, no, Lord.' 'Catherine, did you take any pleasure in it?' This is what Jesus says to Catherine. 'No, Lord, you know I took no pleasure in it. That was because of me.' That's what Jesus says to her. And Father Doug says, 'Well, Mark, if you took no pleasure in it, then there's no sin in it.' Well, that's a liberty that Father Doug took. I wasn't convinced. I wasn't convinced. He said, 'Well, you know about Mother Teresa, right?' I said, 'Yeah, I met Mother Teresa when I was in college at Catholic University.' 'Good for you.' He said, 'Okay, do you remember she was in DC for the National Prayer Breakfast in 1994? Yeah, okay. Well, do you know that a story about the journalists gathering around her after she gave a talk?' I said, 'No, I didn't tell me that one.' She said, 'Well, yeah, they all gathered around her.' I said, 'Mother, what's the hardest thing about being Mother Teresa?' And she looks down and, 'Is it working with the lepers?' they say to her to help her out. 'No, it's easy to see Jesus in the lepers.' And she looks down again. And then she looks up very courageously and looks at all of them and says, 'The hardest thing for me is chastity, chastity, chastity.'" I said, "Thanks for the homily, Father. I think I can carry this cross, right? I mean, if Mother Teresa can battle that, I can do the same." We vanquished him. And then we moved on to Station 8. What was Station 8? That was three women coming down from Buffalo, New York. Sister Jacinta, a nun, her mother, and her sister Miriam. Three women. Station 8 is Jesus meets the woman of Jerusalem, right? All real time. They said, "Mark, we're so sorry for her." They brought me this Charlie Brown Christmas tree, about that big. And it had all these like holy hours on it. And like, this is like end of December, and masses and novenas and rosaries. And they're like, "We're so sorry for you, but here you go." And I said, "Don't weep for me, weep for my children. They're not going to have their father in a month." I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I'm at Station 8. I actually said those words. I can't believe it." And that was Station 8. Station 9, of course, is Jesus falls the third time. And you know what? The shield of faith was down a little bit. I had the armor of God on, but I said, "You know what? He's going to come back the same way. The father of lies, he doesn't change his game. Like, why do we keep falling to the same temptations and accusations? He doesn't change his game." So I went to confession in advance, not to confess future sins, but just to get that spiritual nutrition. So when that arrow came at me, I could have that shield of faith up. Now, for a day or two, there was a bit of a struggle, but we vanquished him again very quickly at that point. Station 10 up through 14 were all going to come at the trial. And very quickly, I'll close with this in the trial. Station 10 through 14, I knew were all going to come to the trial. Now, before we went into that trial, I said to my wife, I think the Eucharist is a big part of your theme here this weekend, too. I said, "We got to go into deep, deep prayer." So I called up St. Agnes in Sellersville. I said, "I want to do a night of adoration, if I could, Father, right into the trial, January 23rd into the 24th. Can I do that?" "Yeah, absolutely, Mark. Would you like to have a mass beforehand?" "Yeah." So we invited all the pro-lifers and all the people to come, and we were going to go right from all-night adoration right down to the federal building, go home, get dressed, and then go down to the federal building. And my lawyers got wind of this, and they're like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "What do you mean? Like, why are you doing this?" I'm like, "Because I have to." They're like, "Well, do it on another day." I said, "No, why?" They're like, "Well, because you're going to be tired." I said, "No, I'm not. I'm going to be energized." I said, "You expect me to go into battle naked? Like, I need to be armed." I said, "Don't worry, I'll pray for you too." But there's something I didn't share with you that came in right before this. I asked my attorneys if the government was going to come in with a plea deal. Yeah. Because why not, right? Like, why do they want to do this? Why go to trial when you can just offer the guy a plea? In fact, that's what the feds do all the time. And they said, well, Mark, it's got to come from you. They're not going to offer you anything. Oh, I said, okay, well, I'm not going to ask for anything. Well, you're not going to get anything. Don't you know on January 6th, I did get a plea deal? Here's the plea deal: no time, no fine, no probation. I'm facing 11 years in prison, $350,000 in fines, and 3 years supervised probation. How many of you have ever been on probation before? Yeah, good for you. Okay, look, it sucks being on probation. I know what it is. I know what it's like. You have to report to somebody. It's a pain in the butt. I was on probation for some pro-life work I did back in '07, and it sucked. They treat you like shit, and excuse my language, and that's just how it goes. So if you get that deal, that's a sweetheart deal. You take that deal. My attorney said, take that deal. I said, I'm not taking that deal. He said, go home and talk to your wife. I said, no, no, no. She ain't going to go for it. Go home and talk to your wife. Trust me, you really, really need to consider this. I said, fine. I go home, I tell my wife, the government came in with a plea deal. And she's like, oh, yeah, what's that? I said, no time, no fine, no probation. She said, yeah, and I said, well, just plead guilty to the assault charge. She said, you're not going to do that. I said, I'm not. She said, no, because you're not a coward. And that's a cowardly deal. Plus, you're innocent. All right, so she's telling me to man up, right? And then she says, Mark, if you decide you want to take this, she said this, God's honest truth. If you decide you want to take this deal, don't bother coming home. What she said. Basically, like, you're not welcome here. Like, you're in battle. Husband, Spartan woman sends her man into battle. Come back with your shield or come back on it, but stay in the mission. We got this. And then she said something even better. She said, we got to do it for the movement. We can't take this deal and all these pro-lifers and First Amendment right holders and sidewalk councils are going to be hung out to dry. We got to risk everything. We got to be all in. All in. Are you all in for your faith? Are you all in for your family? Are you all in for God, right? I had to be all in, knowing that if I went to prison, he'd still bring good out of it. That's what I believed. And so we exited that chapel the night before, and we went down there, and I was calumniated all over again, stripped of my garments, treated like a criminal, lamb to the slaughter. And that's how you are, right? You're just a lamb to the slaughter. They say everything they want about you based on no truth, and they manipulate and coerce and twist the truth. And it's all on display for your family to watch. And you know what? I believe some of them probably were like, yeah, I could see Mark he's probably that kind of guy. I could see them believing some of it because you know what? I'm not a perfect guy. And those lies linger in the universe still to this day. And I still deal with that till this day. I got the Catholic Church that even tells me, aren't you an accused felon? No, I am not an accused felon or even an alleged felon. I am an innocent man that was charged unjustly with felony charges. I have no charge on me, but that's what some people in the church would say. Well, we can't have you in our diocese because, you're a felon. That's a lie. That's there. It happens. You can't avoid it. And you can't defend it because it is what it is. It's your gift and your burden at the same time. So look, man, I'm nailed to the cross. I have one witness. That's my son. Nobody else. My 14-year-old boy is going to take the stand in my defense. It's a lot of pressure on a 14-year-old boy, isn't it? Man, can you imagine getting up there? You say something wrong. You love your dad, don't you, Mark? Yes, I love my dad. He's kind of like a hero to you, isn't he, Mark? Yes. You'd do anything for your father, wouldn't you, Mark? Yes. He's just being honest, yeah. Look, it was slimy, it was slithery, but it is what it was. And he defended and acquitted himself really well. And he corrected them when they were wrong. And I got up there and I did well too and corrected them when they were wrong. And, they come at you pretty hard. Like, you call them baby killers, don't you, Mr. Houck? No, I don't call them baby killers. You call them murderers, don't you, Mr. Houck? No, I don't. Well, what do you call them, Mr. Houck? Well, I call them collaborators in the evil of abortion. So they are baby killers. No, they're sinners just like me. God's honest truth. That was my testimony. You believe you're in a war, don't you, Mr. Houck? On your website it says you're in a battle. You're in a war. Is that right? You believe you're in a war? No. Well, what is it? It was a spiritual battle, spiritual war, not an actual war. I mean, this is the crap that they pull. So, anyhow, January 27th is the day I come off the stand, and I come off literally like a box, a wooden box. And it's like, oh my gosh, I'm elevated above everybody in the courtroom. I'm like, this is station 12. I'm on wood. And if you want to follow Christ, you better look good on wood. And I was on top of wood. I come down and I'm resting in the arms of Jesus and Mary. And I look over at Brian McMonagle and I say, how did I do? He said, you did well, but your son was better. But I'm sitting there and I'm like, he's shaking his head. He said, Mark, you're going to be found guilty. I said, don't worry, Brian. We fought the good fight. We ran the race. We're done. We did what we were called to do, and you did what you were called to do. So it's January 27th. They get the case. This is the day I met my wife 16 years prior. So my testimony and my witness is just about much about the sacrament of marriage as it is about me and my cross and trusting in the Lord. Because that's the day I met my wife 16 years prior on that particular day. That's not lost on me. The day I met my wife, the woman who would embolden me to stay the course, to help me during my defining moment in my life, this is the day of my judgment? Folks, you got to see God's hand in that. So they get the case at 4 o'clock, and about 5:30, they're hung. They come back to the judge and they say, we can't rule. We're hung, you know. Well, can you deliberate a little bit more? He says, no. Adjourned. Go home. We'll see you Monday. I'm in the tomb 3 days, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Man, I'm for station 14. You couldn't write this stuff. I'm in the tomb for 3 days. I coach a couple basketball games that weekend. We emerge from the tomb. Resurrection day. Either way, it's resurrection day. I'm getting out of the tomb that day. I'm either going to a state prison or a federal prison, or I'm going home. So we're coming out. So when we get to the federal building, there's like all these notes being passed to the judge. Like it's 8th grade all over again. Does this girl like me? Does she like me? Like it's weird. The judge has to call every jury member into the chambers one by one to interview them. Yeah, there's a problem in the jury room. Well, they end up kicking a guy off the jury. I'm like, oh no, pro-lifer. We're done. So they had to call the alternate in, and he's like in Lancaster. He was dismissed on Friday. Don't speak about it. Don't say anything till the trial's over. And you're like, oh, geez. So we go to lunch because he's got to come in, and he gets there, and then he gets there. They got to give him the information, and they deliberate. Well, at 3 o'clock, about an hour and a half later, I get a call. They said they have a unanimous verdict. Now, it's got to be unanimous, guilty or not guilty. Otherwise, you're tried again if it's a hung jury. So I'm like, what? Already? An hour and a half? So we go back to the courtroom, and it's 3 o'clock. And you know that's the hour of divine mercy. So I start to sweat because I know I'm going to prison, and my palms are getting really sweaty. It's the first time I was really sweaty all trial. I look back at my sister and I say, prepare yourself. I'm going to be found guilty. Now I'm facing 2 counts. First count gives me 1 year in prison. Second count gives me 10 years in prison. I'm pretty sure I'm going to be found not guilty on the first count, but I know I'm not going to be found not guilty on the second count. So I open the scriptures because I'm really nervous, and it's a Magnificat. That's all I have in front of me all trial is the Magnificat, the Word of God, the daily readings. And I go to the morning prayer, and there's Psalm 57. It says, it's under the wings of God you will be protected. Under the wings of God, right? Psalm 57, something like that. You will be preserved, protected. And the early church believed that the wings of God was a metaphor for the arms of the cross. So I had my peace restored instantly. I was like, we can do this. Together, we can do all things, right? And so when they came in with the first verdict and they said not guilty, I had that peace. But when they came in with the second verdict and said not guilty, I could not believe it. I could not believe that my freedom, which was gone for 4.5 months and was going to be further gone, was instantly restored. But I didn't know it. I'm like hyperventilating, and we're hugging, everyone's happy and order in the court. And I look at Judge Papert. He's kind of watching me. And he was really entertaining the whole trial. But he says, I said, "Thank you, Judge." He said, "No, thank you, Mr. Houck." And I was like, wow, I don't know if judges normally say that stuff to defendants. And then he says, "Mr. Houck, you are free to go." Like I didn't know I was, right? But those words are still ringing in my ear to this day. Freedom. I mean, you wake up with freedom every day, and you just take it for granted. But for me, I don't anymore. But here's the king. Here's the clincher. This is the crowning moment. This is God speaking to me. I already was free. You could put me in prison. I'm still free. You can't take that freedom, men, that comes from your faith, the Eucharist, the cross, and the gifts that he's bestowed on you. They can lock you up till you die. And you hear this from the guys at Auschwitz and all those that were, in the gulags. Father Walter Chiswick and, all these Maximilian, guys that were, and they talk about this. Bonhoeffer. Like, you're already free, man. Man, you're already free. I asked the question at the beginning, who feels like they're in prison? And about 4 or 5 hands went up. You're already free. You're not in bondage. That's what Satan wants you to think. Men, that's my testimony. I'm blessed to share it with you today. All I can tell you is that, all the effects of these things still are real. You still have to deal. You can have all that grace, but all the effects of it, you still have to deal with. You still have to deal with the PTSD that you have. Every time I see a siren, my heart palpitates. When I get pulled over, and I've been a couple times, I'm a nervous wreck, man. Like, my kids all have PTSD. That stuff's real. You got to deal with that. And God gives you the grace to deal with it. But it's not like, all this miraculous healing happens. You still have the effects of all that. And you embrace that. You carry that. And you move on. And you keep going on like a man. Thank you for letting me share. God bless you. I hope you have a great rest of your retreat. Take care.